Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Canada. That's also a very dynamic, confusing situation. In this particular one, we brought you the news on Thursday that the order had been given by the Canadian Prime Minister after declaring the Emergencies Act and invoking a state of emergency, suspending civil liberties and beginning financial, basically, warfare upon the people who were protesters who were unallowed to speak there. So the police and the authorities there began clearing out some of the areas over the weekend in the city of Ottawa. It was very troubling, Krystal. We saw reports also that they banned the media from coming in. They actually put out official statements from the Ottawa police saying, media, you're not allowed within, this area, keeping them out. Some of the footage here was troubling. There's been a lot made of this footage. So people said that a woman was trampled. That doesn't appear to be the case, but there were like horses that were used in order to kind of clear the area. We have some of that footage here. If you're just listening, just stick with us briefly so that the people who are watching can look. Let's go.
Oh, come on through. Come on through. What is happening here? Wow, what is this lady doing? Trampling horses. Trampling. Stop it. Stop it. Look. Oh my God. They just trampled this lady. They just trampled that lady. They just fully trampled that lady. They just fully trampled that lady. There's the lady. There's the lady that was trampled. Yeah, the lady got fully trampled with a horse.
What the fuck is wrong with you guys?
You just got crushed by a horse.
So the woman doesn't appear to have been stepped on, but she was knocked over. That's what apparently all this came down to. Still, obviously, people in riot gear. Another thing that's been happening, Krystal, in the city of Ottawa is that the police are going by and checking everybody's identities, being like, who are you? Do you need to be here? Where are you from?
Yeah.
If you're still here within an hour, I'm going to arrest you. They're doing inspections of businesses, making sure that everybody is a local resident. I saw some guys throwing cameras out of people's faces. It's pretty crazy.
Effectively lock down the city.
Total lockdown,
And in order to, not only keep additional protesters from arriving to, bolster the people who are already there, but also, as we've been covering, this was a highly organized protest from a sort of logistics standpoint. You had people who were ferrying in food, people who were bringing in diesel in order to keep the trucks running, and so they've cut off those supply lines also. So, they're arresting the protesters, they cut off the supply lines, and of course they froze as much of the money and, locked the bank accounts as possible to try to completely freeze this thing out.
Yeah, and then on top of that, we continue to see, and I'll be talking a lot about this in my monologue, which is more about Bitcoin and crypto, but we are talking here about full-scale financial warfare on anybody conducting in these protests. The Ottawa police chief actually spoke yesterday in which he said, not only are we financially freezing the accounts of the people who are involved, but we will continue to do so in the future for many months to come. Take a listen.
If you are involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges. Absolutely. This investigation will go on for months to come. It has many, many different streams, both from a federal financial level, from a provincial licensing level, from a criminal code level, from a municipal breach of court order, breach of court injunction level. It will be a complicated and time-consuming investigation that will go on for a period of time. You have my commitment that that investigation will continue and we will hold people accountable for taking our streets over.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's completely nuts. And as you said, this is not just like canceling bank account, canceling mortgage, canceling car loan, complete debanked from the Canadian financial system, which is truly nuts. And then what they're saying also is like, we're going to continue to look and to do so. I just can't get over their weaponization of like terrorism financing language, which you point to. It's like they're using the same laws under their terrorism financing guidelines to like compare a wire transfer from like Saudi Arabia to a hijacker to like some more normal person in
like
Nebraska.
Grandma in Kansas.
Grandma in Kansas being like, here's $50. Yeah, I support what you're doing. They're like, this is foreign money coming in. Like I said, I have a whole thing about how this shows you that we need much more better ways in order to get away from this level of financial warfare. But what we wanted to focus on as well is kind of the, the export of this protest as an international movement. We saw some flare-ups in Jerusalem, some some flare-ups in New Zealand. Now there's a lot of talk here in the United States as to whether there will be a trucker protest or similar level of protest against restrictions. And already, even though there's only talk of this online, and there's not yet a substantial group that's big enough, here in the capital of the United States, let's put this up there, just a couple blocks from where we're filming this segment, the Capitol perimeter fence is coming back before the State of the Union. Why? Because of the trucker freedom convoy heads for Washington. Now, once again, this convoy, which was supposed to start out in California, doesn't even seem to be all that big. To be honest, I mean, it doesn't have nearly the same level of salience just because we don't have even close to the same level of restrictions nationwide here in the United States. In fact, I believe almost every mask mandate in the country is set to expire within the next 2 weeks. You know, Boris Johnson and most people in the West are basically opening up. Boris Johnson just this morning lifted all coronavirus restrictions. But what we have here in the US is that even the inkling is enough to trigger a full-scale crackdown, with the Capitol fence going back up, which was a scar on this city. And second was that I just read that all DC police vacation was canceled for March 1st. So they're calling in the full, force of Metropolitan Police. And I guess the Capitol Police, these idiots, they can finally show up, possibly do something and earn their pay. But, it's not outside the realm of possibility. They call in the National Guard, all for nothing. I mean, from what we can tell, is nothing.
It reminds me of the freak out before that supposed QAnon.
The QAnon thing. March, it was like the real inauguration day.
Or whatever, which turned out to be nothing. I mean, I tried to look into this thing because I didn't know. I was like, oh, maybe there really is a thing that's happening.
And I looked too.
It was originally, the first reports I saw said, oh, it's going to start in California and could disrupt the Super Bowl. That didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen at all.
And that one was, the original report was like, it's going to start in California. They're going to drive across the country. They're going to arrive in time for Biden's State of the Union. That doesn't seem to have materialized whatsoever. And then as I was researching this, I found another potential protest that the dates are fluid. They have different routes. None of it has actually come to fruition. Not to say that there isn't something that could come together, but the quote that I saw online was at this point it's more aspirational than reality. And I do think that at this point, and maybe partly because of what we've watched unfold in Canada, cities and states are moving to undo mask restrictions, make sure schools are open, lifting vaccine passport mandates. There's a major loosening of restrictions even in blue states and blue cities. So they're just like, what would you even be really protesting at this point? There's nothing new coming from the federal government. There aren't many in place still at the state and the local level. So there just may not be quite that sort of spark and fire to protest against pandemic restrictions that are already going away here in the US. I do want to say, just going back to the footage of, the police crackdown, and especially because I do think this is like a low bar, but there was a lot more restraint from law enforcement in Canada than we've seen in our own country. I saw only 2 reports of potential injuries from the police. Still doesn't make it acceptable whatsoever. But the complete sort of like holistic use of tools that they've deployed here to make sure that these protests cannot continue is incredibly chilling and deeply troubling. You have what effectively happened here is the moment that these protesters threatened Capitol by blocking those bridges and making it hard for the auto plants to churn out cars at a time when, of course, supply chains are already strained. That was when the switch was flipped, because up to that point, very little had been done, honestly. They were sort of allowed to occupy the city. They were allowed to do their thing. They were allowed to protest. And then the minute the Capitol was threatened, boom, finances freezed. The city is shut down. They're threatening to seize their trucks and confiscate them and use the money to pay off businesses. I mean, just completely insane actions and also insane potential plans. And so, what if you're on the left and you're thinking in terms of something like, what would a general strike look like? This should be a real warning for you. And it doesn't matter whether you support the things that these individuals were protesting. It doesn't matter if you like these specific people. Completely irrelevant. The trigger here was when Capitol was threatened. So if you're on the left, it should be very clear to you that these are aggressive authoritarian actions of the state that you should absolutely stand against. And our own government was involved in pushing the Canadians to do this because it was Biden who calls Trudeau, and then all of a sudden, all of these actions are ultimately taken. We've pointed out before that the Canadian public is largely on the side of these incredibly authoritarian and
From what we
draconian
can tell, yeah.
draconian measures that have been put in place. That is even more troubling. Because, and this is something that Glenn Greenwald is pointing out online, sometimes authoritarianism is popular. And that's what makes it even scarier, that you can have a situation where the public is clamoring for these types of clampdowns and lockdowns. We saw this in the wake of 9/11. Yeah. Same spirit of, yes, let's, like, whatever it takes, Patriot Act, do it. That's why you have a constitution in place to protect people's rights, even when you have public sentiment that because of some sort of either real or perceived threat coalesces around these draconian and authoritarian responses. So that's just my word to people on the left. They arrested, so some of the numbers here, the federal government has frozen $2.5 million at least of funds. The 3 of the leaders of the protests were arrested for, quote, mischief, which is just basically like, you're doing something we don't like.
That's like in the
There's
1830s.
not exactly a law for it, but we just don't like it, and we want to make an example of you.
Yeah, that's like old in the Wild West. They would just arrest somebody and be like, we don't like you around this town.
Right.
That's basically
Mischief.
it. I mean, look, this is why we have a Bill of Rights. And, you know, Canadians, you can tell me all you want, but look, there are clearly a lot more avenues in your country in terms of the law for the government to truly be able to do whatever it wants. The debanking aspect is the part that truly, that's where I felt like I was taking crazy pills, honestly. Yeah. And, you know, we pointed this out during Floyd, and even now, it's already illegal to occupy a city. You don't need to declare an Emergencies Act. Like, that's not illegal. You have everything that you could possibly need if you wanted to. There's no need in order to justify all these draconian measures. They did it because they can. That's it. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. So, to me, we have to take away their ability to do it at all. And to watch them, you know, debank these people, especially people who are, look, one guy, he's on the street. He's like, I'm just going to get a coffee. They're like, where are you from? He says, I'm from Alberta. They said, you can't be here. Smacked the phone out of his face, said, you're not going anywhere. And if I see you again, I'm arresting you. I'm like, oh my God, that's completely crazy. This is broad daylight. Same thing with these businesses. They're doing business license inspections. And what they pointed out in that clip we showed you, when they say provincial licensure, they mean your ability to drive. They mean your car insurance. They mean your ability to have a living. I mean, can they take that all away from you because you participated in a protest in supposedly the free West? I don't know. I mean, I see this as one of the most dystopian things I've seen in a long. It's like a dream. I can't believe it's happening in Canada.
And the fact that so much of the population is on board with it just adds to the dystopia. You know, that's being offered
as often very popular.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, right? I mean, again, we've seen it here in the wake of 9/11. We've seen it. I mean, we've seen it at times, you know, with regards to coronavirus. Like, it is not the case that authoritarianism is always unpopular. Oftentimes it is actually popular, and that makes it more dystopian to watch what is happening there. So again, I think now the thing to watch for here, because they basically have all the protesters cleared out in Canada as far as we can tell based on media reports. Now the thing to watch for here is what is the security state freak out around potential protests that haven't even materialized here. And just to be super specific, there hasn't even been a request for a permit to protest put into DC government.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's how sort of speculative the potential protests here are at this point.
And yet the fence continues to go up. Amazing.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.